So JJ, we came yesterday. We created a Zoom seminar for our dojo. Why did we do that?
A Zoom seminar?
Yeah, didn't I mean we did a Zoom Christmas party,
Oh,
right? We did a Zoom Christmas party for our dojo yesterday. Why did we do that?
well, I think this year highlights the importance of the community, right? Um, I think, well, especially coming from my perspective, right? So I lost four members of my family, including my mother, this year. So that kind of really forces you to place the important things in life first. And as you go through this pandemic, I think what you've come to realize, and you and I have talked about it already, is that you come to realize that the relationships are the most important things. And so for me, it was a matter of community and working with Kevin and working with you and working with Vu and working with everyone else. Crystal, who did a fantastic job at the party, Joshua and MG from Canada. It's that did you know that physical distance becomes inconsequential when you can do things like this. Especially we're in a pandemic mode where everybody's bubble isolating, but it doesn't matter. And the way to survive everything is to maintain connection, which I think is just part of Aikido, right? So we just took the connection from the mat and we just expanded it outwards.
Yeah.
So I think that's why we did it.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. The thing about Aikido is you're always adapting, right, to someone else's energy coming at you, and you turn and you don't want to fight them with force. You go with the energy that you have. And I find it kind of interesting how some of us have adapted to like a new medium, like getting on Zoom and doing weapons classes and stuff like that, because it's in a way it's part of our evolution, right? Like, all right, we don't have Aikido in the classical sense that we're used to, but we're certainly figuring out and getting creative on how we can continue doing the movements, how we can continue training together, how we can continue to do exactly what you're saying, which is kind of connecting.
Right. Right.
um yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say it really meant a lot, not only to for the organization that we did. It was a lot of fun in a way. That 6 days of preparation, there was a lot of laughter, there was a lot of stress, there was a lot of like boxes that had to be checked, but it's just like we got mobilized, and in the end, we got to see, we had the technical committee there, we had sensei came onto the call.
Yeah, I will say that, I was hopeful that we would have a decent turnout. And for me, 30 people would have been great.
Yeah,
What we pulled off, three times that number is amazing
yeah,
for doing this on, like you said, basically on a 6-day fly, putting it all together and doing it for the first time ever.
right.
So I think it was amazing that it turned out the way it did.
Yeah, and I also think that it really, like, if anything's happened, and I talk about this with various people in our community, it really kind of solidified, the friendships and the caring that we have for one another. And you and I have known each other for 30 years.
Do you want to say? I wasn't going to say how long.
You were a teenager. You were a
I
teenage
was I
kid.
was just going to say I think I've known you. Well, actually, when did you test Shodan?
Oh, please. When did I test Shodan? I test Shodan in Montreal of, was it 95?
Okay, so yeah, I was going to say the way I like to, without getting into dates, is I remember people when we were all wearing our white pajamas, right? So I do remember you in white pajamas.
Yeah,
Now,
we were in white pajamas
right,
together.
Absolutely. So I remember that. And that's how basically I know how
I
how
know.
far back when I look at certain people and I go, yeah, I remember that.
It's true.
So
It's true. We have a different orientation. I know we
yeah.
could, we're colleagues. But
Um,
yes, you were John Montes in those days, and
yeah, so
you were
yeah,
a kid coming in and out of the place. That's what I remembered. You were kind of serious.
I was well in and out because of school. I was 16. I started when I was 16, right? So I was still finishing high school, then going into college. So life was just nuts. It was just, and I was always trying to make sure this fit into my life. Very weird. I don't know how I knew then that this was going to be a part of my life, like forever. Knock on wood, uh, that I'll be doing this. I like to borrow Sensei's phrase. As long as I can walk, I'll be doing this.
Yeah,
Um, so I don't know how I knew that that was for me back then, but I just knew.
yeah,
And
yeah. Well, I remember like my when my son started ballet, my friend who encouraged him to go called me and said, I knew he was hooked from the first plie. And I was like, really? I didn't see that. But I'm wondering, when we started to like do the rolling, start to roll and take ukemi and started to throw, um, I remember that my first official class at the New York Aikai, because I started with Nakazono in a different context, learning the
okay.
medicine. But when I joined the dojo, I remember like that first class. It was a
Oh, I
morning.
remember my first class because I remember my first partner,
Who was your first partner?
Harvey Conisberg.
Really?
Yes.
Who's
So
who, who's
the
teaching?
it was Sensei's class. It was Sensei's class, and it was Harvey was just there, as back then he was. He was just there taking classes as well. Harvey was still Harvey,
Right.
but he regularly took classes as well, despite being an advanced practitioner himself. Um, so the circumstances for that was my entry to the dojo is because I was in school with two brothers that their father was one of Sensei students from the 70s and knew Harvey and everything. So he brought me and personally introduced me to Yamada Sensei. And then when I got on the mat, Yamada Sensei said, "Here, come here," and took me by the collar and said, "You train with Harvey." And that was my first day of Aikido, was Harvey Conisberg taking
Wow.
a Kemikane. Yeah.
Wow. Well,
Yeah.
in my first class, it was a morning class, and it was a Monday morning, and Steve was teaching, and he had this continual monstrous energy, like a revved up engine that just kept going. But I was off to the side of the mat with Imetai. Do you remember Imetai?
Yes. Yes.
He was as wide as he was tall, and I was learning how to roll, and I got as far as like we did tenkans, and I did forward rolls, which I'd done before, but he was about to teach me back rolls. And Phil Ozeki came up to us and said, "Throw her to the wolves." And so my very first class, I was literally thrown into the general population. I don't know if you remember morning class back then, but it was a rough and tumble place. A
Morning
place.
class was, yeah, morning class was an interesting
It
class.
was interesting mix of people. They didn't mix with the day and evening
No,
people much. Just
no.
some of us were crossovers. Like I was a crossover, and I remember being just absolutely petrified. And Imetai said, "But I haven't taught her back rolls yet." And he was like, "Screw the back rolls."
Yeah,
Consequently, it took me like years to learn how to do back rolls. When we would do those lines going across the Ukemi
yeah,
line, I would just walk. No back rolls.
yeah.
But yeah, and so I
Well,
taught.
it was the same for me because the cute story behind it is we were this gentleman's his name is Frank Crespo. Frank Crespo's son and
Yeah,
I think we were like 14 years old or something, and we wanted to do Aikido. And he didn't want us to train by ourselves because he thought and rightfully so, he thought we were going to break each other's arms because we didn't know what we were doing. And the reason I say that is because Frank had um, Nidai book, Aikido. I think it was called Aikido Complete or Aikido, just whatever. And so what happened was his son and I, we actually borrowed his book one day, made photocopies of the entire thing, and then returned the book. So he didn't know we did this. And I joined when I was 16. So probably when I was like either 14 or 15, we were practicing in like parks and in gyms off of the book. And
Really?
so when my first class at New York Aikikai was just like yours, thrown to the wolves, take your ukemi right now. You're going to learn on the go.
Right.
And it was a pack. I think what saved me was a packed class. So I really couldn't be tossed around like a sack. But it was a
There was
very
time
packed
for
class.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, and just like you said, right to the wolves. Just get
Yeah.
at it.
Throw it to the wolves. It's interesting because if you think about, there's so many places that don't have access to the kind of Aikido that we had. I mean, I hate to talk about us like so nostalgically as the golden age, but we didn't really know what we had. There are countries that have learned Aikido just like you did, just going through a book and
So
practicing
yeah,
technique. And
the when people talk to me about that, I always say, you know, we are such an anomaly in New York to have the quality of students that we had at the time, and then to have two Shihan who were Uchideshi from the founder is just unheard of. It just we had such a head start on everyone else in the world, really. Unless you trained with Kanai and Chiba directly, if
yeah,
you weren't in one of those major centers, we had a head start on the world. And
yeah.
it was
I know, and even like our secondary teachers, like Harvey and Hal and
yeah.
I'm
You name
in
it.
and
Steve P, Harvey, Hal,
Angel,
um, Angel,
Steve,
sure.
Jane.
Jane Ozeki, yeah. There's a whole generation of people that don't know Jane Ozeki. Yeah.
I know,
That
and
you said Phil Ozeki. There's a whole generation of people that don't know Phil
more
Ozeki.
people that don't know Phil Ozeki. I know, and I would say I took it for granted, but the truth is that I was there all the time. I don't even think I took it for granted. I think that I just kept wanting to go back for more. I wanted to get back into that. It was like a gigantic playground.
Yes, I totally agree. Totally agree. Despite the hard training, and I mean, when I was younger, so my motivations for training were different than they are now. But despite the hard training, it was like a playground. You always wanted to go.
You did.
Yeah.
So how do you think, like in that vein, how do you think that the training changed for you?
So my life outside of Aikido really, um, I don't want to say informed, but kind of directed my attitudes towards Aikido, which was very martial. Um, and so it was, because of my former career in law enforcement, I had a very different purpose of training in Aikido, which evolved over time. And I like to think that I'm evolving uh, and changing the way I've trained. I always keep in mind. I guess the best way to say it is when for me the definition of the word martial changed. And so in the beginning, when you're 16, 17, and you're a boy, because that's all you are at that age, um, your testosterone gets in the way and it interferes with the proper functioning of your mind. So you tend to conflate the idea of martial of being physically strong and just this. And my idea of martial now is totally different from that in the sense that now it's a lot more of trying to understand the angles, my timing, connection. it's the esoteric parts of the art, or the intangible parts of the art, that really fascinate me now. Um, and that's martial. That's what really martial is. And I think that's what makes this so beautiful, is because despite the fact that, I may be a fatty and 100 pounds heavier than you and I can still practice martially. It
Yeah.
doesn't matter our weight. It doesn't matter our gender. It doesn't matter anything. You could still practice martially. So that's
Yeah.
how I changed. What about you?
Well, I came from already like a metaphysical tradition learning the medicine. So I always had an appreciation for the formlessness that I wanted to achieve, but I was young like you, and so the art for me was very, very physical, and I was very fiery, and I really wanted to go out there. I wanted to be able to give it as much as I could and take it as much as I could.
Right,
So that was me sort of bowing to the physical,
right.
right? Which obviously, over time that starts to shift as the body shifts. Um, but luckily, so does the information that starts to go get in starts to shift
Yep.
and allows the body to age and do this at the same time.
Hmm.
So, I've seen so many beautiful, talented Aikidoists out there. And yet, I just don't think, in my opinion, you can shortcut the kind of like understanding that comes over time. Like you said, like martial has changed for you. And
Right,
part of it is, I really think that that's part of what we were talking about adapting. You
right.
know, it's be connecting to the moment, to the circumstance, to the stimulus, to the circumstances. But I think that wisdom in Aikido comes over time, and there's really very little way you can do that without this.
There's no short, you said it best. There's no shortcuts. There's no
And
shortcuts to this.
right, and that's what Sugano Sensei used to say. He was like, the important thing is that you
Right.
train and study, train and study. Yeah, I mean, it's so interesting because I've known you since you were a kid, and what I didn't know what was going to happen over time is that your practice has gotten so thoughtful. You really are like a historian of the art. You're a real student. You study things in angles in ways that I don't, because I'm a little bit more I'm a little more formless, or I have a tendency to just, your process is so fascinating to me. And I learned a lot from all the information that you've accumulated over time, and also owned it in your body, right?
Yeah. All I can say is I'm trying. It's a constant. This is just a journey that you keep. This, yeah. I don't see an end to this. Because I really don't. I don't see an answer to every question, and I don't see an end point. I think this is one of these things that every time, as you said, as you get older and things change, you change Aikido, and then all of a sudden you're making your these adaptations. You're adapting to these new environmental factors that are affecting you, and it creates a whole new paradigm of training.
Yeah.
So you know, I wanted to mention that you mentioned two people that, for people that don't know, that Imitai and Phil Zecchi, these were some solid people.
Oh my God.
And so what's interesting is that if you tried to use force with these people, you realize that, number one, you were going against the principles of Aikido. Number two, you realize that unless you were built like a sumo, like those guys were, and not calling them fat, I'm just calling them
Oh,
solid masses of humanity. Um, all it was going to be was just a stalemate. And so it forced me to, number one, really early on, get rid of the concept of, or start chipping away at the concept of you being a Superman, right? So
right.
it teaches you humility off the bat. Once you realize that you're up against some serious physically imposing individuals, and number two, going back to what you said about the New York Aikikai at that time, we had people who had cross trained in so many different arts.
Sure.
And then what I always found fascinating was they came to Aikido,
Yeah.
right? So I remember guys from Goju-Ryu Karate, Kyokushinkai Karate, from Judo guys, Tai Chi guys, James Keller, right? So James Keller comes to mind. Just one of these another physically imposing guy, and different arts, and it forced you to be honest to Aikido.
Yeah.
Do Aikido because it won't work anywhere else.
It's
Because
so, yeah.
these guys won't let you.
I know,
So,
I know. And that was like, that was the hard part about being a beginner in those times, is not to, when you didn't have the skill set to know how, the learning curve is actually high
it was
to,
yeah, it was steep.
it
It was
is,
steep.
to
I,
let
I
the,
want to throw out another name. There was Mike Douglas, Mikey Doyle. Mikey
oh my,
Doyle.
he's still a good friend.
So Mikey Doyle was another one that I trained with regularly in the beginning. And I appreciate it because here again, I thought I was 16, 17 year old and thought I could go through him.
Yeah,
He's older, whatever. Get out of here. So the learning curve was,
I know. And you didn't know, also the illusion that you're actually throwing somebody. I mean, it's an illusion.
yeah,
You really can't, if someone doesn't want to be thrown, they're not going to be thrown. There has to be something else that happens in the relationship that makes the makes the sauce happen.
right, right, right. Yeah.
And
Yeah, interesting times in the beginning in New York.
it was,
Definitely,
yeah.
definitely.
But we kept going back.
Yes, that's the thing. It was like you said, it was a playground.
Yeah.
As frustrating as it was, and I left the dojo plenty of nights
Oh,
frustrated beyond belief, and questioning. I remember one particular night stands in my head. I think I was doing it for like 5 or 6 years, and I just remember I had the worst class ever because I couldn't do anything right, and I was like, I just spent. I was very hard on myself. I just spent the 5, 6 years. This is a waste. I'm not getting it. So the frustration level is very high. But like you said, that you go to sleep that night, you wake up and you're like, okay, I gotta go to the dojo.
right.
I gotta go train.
Right. Well, that's usually before a breakthrough, something like that would happen where everything would just go to seed and it was just like, okay, that's it. That's it. I can't put my
Yeah.
feet together.
Yeah.
But it's just, I get, it's all part of the learning process and the growing up process. Um,
Totally agree.
yeah.
Totally agree. And one thing that I am definitely envious, because you had the wherewithal and I did not, was to spend that extra time with the Shihan, right? So Yamada Sensei, Sugano Sensei, and you had a wonderful relationship with Sugano Sensei.
I did.
So
I got
what,
lucky.
what other things did he impart to you that
Well, besides, gosh, it's so hard for me to talk about my time with the senseis. I don't know why. It's almost like I lived it but never articulated it. So
totally understand?
know what I mean? I was really, really lucky because I was newly single and I had a car. And so the thing with Yamada Sensei was that I didn't get a chance to see him that much at the dojo because he was traveling so
He was
much.
always around, right?
And he needed someone to drive him because he hated Butch's driving. And I started taking him to seminars. And it was the only way I could really see what he was doing, and it was actually an interesting way to see what he was doing because I had the benefit of seeing people through his eyes and seeing people that don't normally train with him through their eyes. So it was a very interesting perspective traveling with him and getting to know him and getting to see how he maneuvered through students, how he memorized knew everybody's names, how he kept Like yesterday on the call, coming on the call, that's what
Yeah,
he did
yeah.
we would go to these seminars and he would like change the schedule and move everything around and get these dojo shows all like unbalanced. But that's Aikido too. Sugano Sensei was really they were really opposites to travel with, but he was the teacher that I took most classes from because he was around. And what I learned early on taking his classes, and I don't remember if you felt this way, was coming off the mat feeling cleared. Like we generated so much energy in that class that
Mhm.
when at the end it was just like I felt like my cells were altered.
Hmm.
So that process meant a lot to me. So I can't really pinpoint exactly some of the because we talk we would talk. So I started driving, so consequently I started driving Sugano Sensei around as well. So I was driving two Shihans around, and it was and with Yamada Sensei we would listen to like Ella Fitzgerald and Louis Armstrong on the top, and smoke cigarettes and sing on the top of our lungs. And with Sugano Sensei we turned the volume off, we didn't turn the radio off, and we would talk and he would talk, and we talked about Aikido, and we talked about watches. We talked about his family. We talked about we talked about what made a student pick a teacher. We talked about the essence of techniques, and the great thing about Sugano Sensei is everyone really felt that they were also his best friend. Like he was so accessible, and he was so willing to talk to people, right?
Yeah, totally. He was always willing after class. You'd find him sitting on a bench or something. And if you wanted to talk, he was there.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely.
So
But it's funny because um, you talk about feeling cleansed or maybe even recharged after. Um, and I and I've left his class plenty of times just scratching my head. Just, it's just
I know
like,
because you couldn't
damn,
see what he was
how
doing.
did he do that? It's just
No.
and for me it was always a head scratcher, and it was trying to get what he was doing, trying to figure out how he did things. Always had me scratching my head.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Well, it was what he was doing was just full of energy and very deceptive. And it's deceptive and clear at the same time,
it's an interesting, yeah,
martially
martially
deceptive.
deceptive, and that's what had me scratching my head
Yeah,
because
but
I'm
his movement.
constantly like, how did he get to that position? Like, how
Yeah.
did he execute that cleanly?
Yeah.
And,
But how many times did you feel like, I mean, he used to send me through the spin cycle on those
oh,
Ariminage.
totally. Yeah,
And then, or like you'd see this arm coming at you that you like,
yeah.
you,
And that's the interesting too about him. There was something about the gi becoming a suit of armor and his arms becoming like pipes.
yeah.
And so there was this, it's like you said, if he caught you in one of his iriminaye and that arm came out, that
Yeah.
was iron.
Yeah.
It was
I
just,
know.
so it was amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. And,
Yeah.
and yeah. And your head was moving out of the way.
Oh, it would come off if it did. Yeah.
Yeah. I remember there
Oh,
was one, and he was shied away from the fancy ukemi, right? Like that was one thing he used to talk about that. He used to talk about he didn't like stylized ukemi.
right.
He wanted the I don't want to speak for him, but he wanted the connection to be authentic. He wanted it to
Yes.
be
Yes.
right.
Yes.
He didn't want people doing fancy stuff for the sake of it. He wanted
Right.
the expression of the two energies to be real. And I remember one time I was working out. I don't know. I think it was with Gina Zerilli. I don't think she'll remember this. Gina, I don't know if you'll remember this. And we were doing kokyu, right? And people were taking very fancy ukemi and doing the rolls out and the rolls out and the rolling out and rolling out. And he came up to us and he's like this, boom, and there was only one way you could go, and so he just kept going faster, faster, and he was just kokyu,
Yes.
kokyu,
Yes.
kokyu,
Yeah.
faster,
Yeah.
faster,
Yeah.
and there was no fancy ukemi. It was just you're down. You're up, you're down.
Right. Yeah.
You're up,
Yeah.
you're down, back up.
It's funny you say that. He was yelling at, people have a very, I don't want to say all the time, but people tend to have a like almost like a teddy bear look at Sugano Sensei, and I would agree, except I wouldn't say Teddy. I would say, yeah, he was a bear.
Yeah,
And so when he wanted to turn it on, he had a certain fire or a furnace, and when he wanted to turn it on, he did.
I
I
know.
remember I remember distinctly a couple of times being yelled at by him for not being fast or doing what he called lazy Aikido.
Yeah.
Um, so I remember that,
Yeah.
sure.
Well, for him, the whole thing was quality and not quantity.
Yes.
He said, I'd rather have 45 minutes of pure, like solid movement than people taking 2 hour, 3 hour classes a day, you know. But
Right.
yeah, I know those are, and of course, I know we get to have that information in us and
Yeah.
to carry it on. And of course, getting thrown by Yamada Sensei, it was like an explosion. It was like a bomb going off in your system.
Yeah. For Yamada Sensei, I remember a definitely a distinct feeling, and it was although both had me off balance all the time, there was something distinctly sharp
Yeah.
about Yamada Sensei.
And explosive.
Yeah, and so what happens is that sharpness ends up being explosive. It just because you don't expect that sharp cut coming, and it devastates you. So yeah, I do very distinct feels about their throwing styles.
Yeah. Yeah. And then you had like, I mean, Hal's taken my lights out a couple of times where I remember one time he threw me. And what he would do is he would throw you, he'll leave you like 5 feet off the ground and then turn his energy away. So you had absolutely no way to get down, but with your own laurels, like you had to kick in the abdominal muscles to get down. I remember one time he did it. It was so fast and so brutal. And I remember standing up again thinking, please don't throw me again.
For how it took me a very long time to appreciate what he was doing. Hal was way beyond, for the first 10 years of Aikido, Hal was just, I couldn't reach what Hal was doing.
Yeah.
And I don't know exactly what the day was for me, but there was a day when it just clicked and I was like, wow.
Yeah.
And then yeah, so Hal does a whole other different thing.
Yeah. And then I used to love watching Jane Ozeki pick the biggest, most lumbering guys and make mincemeat out of them.
Yep.
I mean,
Jane floated.
oof.
I like to see James do Suwariwaza. Jane floated.
Yeah,
Pretty amazing.
she's
Yeah.
beautiful. And now here we are now, and Zoom.
So let me ask you now, talking about the difference in times now, what would the younger you say about you now, or what would you say about the younger?
Oh my God, what would I? Well, first of all, I would tell the younger me to buy a lifetime membership. No, I'm
Yeah.
joking. Buy a lifetime membership. You're going to stay. I wasn't
Oh,
right. I mean, I don't know how many times I was just like, oh, I can't do it. I know I'm gonna be superstitious the moment I pay that kind of money. I'm gonna like something have a
what a big mistake that was for me back then too.
no. I just didn't have the vision. I know that's not the deepest of reasons. Um, I still love the art then as much as I do now.
Yeah.
Of course, you know, I don't know. What would you say? I have to think about.
Um,
Oh, my daughter. She's going.
well,
Eh.
definitely the part about me now telling the younger version is definitely um lighten up.
Yeah.
It would be to understand that, get it out of your head that this is the answer, because it's not.
Right.
Not. That would probably be me telling my younger self now. The younger self looking at me now, I hope is happy with where it's at. Right.
Yeah.
Like I said, I just continue to keep trying. And like you said, just keep training. Just keep
Right.
training. Keep
Right.
training. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I had no idea, when I started, I had no idea, even though I watched older people train, I had no idea how my body was going to break down, or not break down, or it was going to change. I remember when I hit 40 something, and all of a sudden I didn't want to take the kind of ukemi where I kicked up and and I was
Right.
flying, like all of a sudden the changes started to happen. I think when I was younger, I really thought I was going to be this invincible person. And um, I think that, like, I would tell my younger person that the I'm so much, the art is so much richer for what I experienced and what I went through, and all the hard knocks and everything it's not about looking pretty. It's not performative. That Aikido is in the moment. It's just that essence, and it's over.
Right.
And that I didn't have to polish my exterior, my to make everything look good for people. That I needed to be real, and I needed to learn how to connect. And
Right.
I think that what I would tell my younger self is, you don't connect with your head. You don't try to figure out what someone's going to do next. The connection that I wanted, that I learned over time, was something that happened from center to center. Not be, that my I that it was okay to prepare my body to do the technique, but the actual connection happens in that moment. And that I couldn't manipulate the moment. I couldn't will anybody to move. I just had to be with the other person.
Right. Right.
And I think that I didn't understand as well when I first started.
Yeah. That
I
again,
didn't.
I think that's part of the no shortcuts. I don't
Yeah.
think you can know that in the beginning,
No. No.
which is why I don't think I would change per se. I wouldn't change the way I've come up,
Yeah.
because I think I had to go through all of that hard stuff first to understand um, its value back then and its the lack of value now.
Yeah. And it's
So, or the
right.
lack of importance now.
And the truth is, like, the way you and I started, I think back then we had less in common than we do now. I think I love training with you. I really
Likewise, absolutely.
enjoyed
It is.
this.
Yeah, it's funny how Aikido being on the mat has brought people from different worlds in together, just like you said.
Yeah.
So that's very interesting now too.
Yeah.
That's a whole other aspect of this community that we're a part of.
Yeah. I know. I mean, I remember, like, I don't remember exactly when, but I remember, like, anytime we would think about stuff that we were going to do at the dojo, you were like always one of the first names that would pop into my head. It's like, oh, I want JJ to be part of that. Or I'm gonna ask JJ if he would help with that. It's like, I mean, that how, as you said, we sort of like come together over time. You know,
Yeah, definitely. I think the other thing too is, and this is something that I hope like the younger generation sees from us, is that for those people that are interested in continuing going forward and they think this is going to be in their life moving forward, is um, wanting to get involved in seeing the dojo thrive.
Yeah.
and continue. And I remember watching you guys um, do the little things that made the dojo work. And so it's you, Steve, and over the years, and just all the other people, different members of the board, and the board has changed its composition over time.
A
But
lot.
yeah, yeah, but seeing the board members and seeing what they did, um, and ensuring that the dojo continues. So that's what I kind of hope that people pick up on and assume for themselves, so that we know this thing is going to continue healthy going forward.
Yeah. Well, we're like-minded. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
This is what harmony looks like. Me and JJ.
yeah.
This is what harmony looks like. Whether we're talking and relate, and it's an exchange of verbal energy, or whether, right, whether I get to throw JJ in a Riminage, which is one of my favorite. Oh, I like throwing you in Kaitanage, actually. I love Aikido out of the dojo. This is the dojo. I mean, that's the whole thing, is like, what is Aikido? I can't say that this isn't. I've used it off the mat plenty of times. You were a law enforcement officer. You used it off the mat plenty of times,
Oh, sure.
right?
Absolutely. The philosophy, absolutely.
I
It's
mean,
gotten me out of physical altercations more times than I've actually had to put people, put my hands on people.
right. So you of all people can speak to that. Well, I mean, I think that, like, well, I think I said this early on in our conversation, that we've had to get creative, and this is the art part of martial art, that um, I also have experience in a Chinese art, excuse me, called Yichuan. And so that is something that lends itself to more solo training. So so while we can't train in the way that we all look forward to, I've been, trying, at least adapting, so I could still feel the movements, and the truth is that it really feels good to have focused a lot on weapons, which I hadn't been able to do in a long time, and use weapons, use the Joe and the Boken in creative ways, not just in ways that inform the technique, that show the movements, show the genesis of the movements, to keep a class moving, in spite of the fact that we can't have our traditional throw and stand up, or um, it's just going with the flow, rolling with the times. You, JJ?
Yeah. No, I agree. I'm going to jump right on what you said about the weapons work. This year, because of the pandemic, has really forced me to look at weapons work from a different angle, which is, I'm not interested in seeing, the hits of the either the Joe or the or the Boken. That doesn't interest me. Seeing how the Tai Sabaki works, and really paying attention to, like, what are they doing apart from clacking wooden weapons, what's going on in the bodywork, and how does that relate off the mat. That's the thing that really I'm looking at now. And so what am I focusing on during that is seeing how that translates from weapon to tachiwaza and, weaponless training. So that's
Yeah,
my focus. That's, if there's one silver lining out of this, you know, situation that we all find ourselves in, it's that it's forced me to look at different things differently. Like,
right. Yeah. Also, some of it kind of, it's not so satisfying to do Tai Sabaki and the movements, without another person, but it's been very illuminating in a way. feeling the body moving through space without someone else, and the positioning, and where the tension is, and where my alignment is, and where my weight changing is. It's like you can still.
Yeah.
So I find that I could still work on that, just to feel it from an energetic standpoint.
The support,
This
to me, the
movement.
support is just amazing for that.
Yeah, and even just without a bookend and Joe, just even just feel the movements, that just like this, taking in a key and then depositing it. You can still work with energy. You can still work with key whether someone's touching you or not. It's just it's as we as the theme of this conversation has been. It's a lot more fun to do it with our friends,
Yeah,
but and with the
that's true.
people that, even if they're not our friends, but it's still, I'm still learning. We're still learning.
Yeah. Still coming back to the playground. That's good.
Exactly. It's
Still coming
just
back to the playground.
it looks like Hollywood Squares meets the Brady Bunch half the time. That's it.
Yeah, I think that's good.